I stepped off the metro at Gallery Square station and felt the humid June air settle over my shoulders like a damp shawl. My breath caught at the side of the white marble facade of the Johnson Centre, draped in pastel bunting and framed by blooming hydrangeas. This was where my cousin Alison and her friends had gathered for what they had touted as the highlight of the summer, a lavish charity gala for our family's foundation. My heart pounded in a familiar rhythm, half excitement, half unease. I checked my reflection in the tinted glass doors, smoothing the folds of my emerald satin dress. At 25, I'd always been the youngest cousin, the recent college graduate, with dreams in my eyes and a modest savings account to fuel them. My passions lay in community outreach, not fundraisers hidden behind velvet ropes. Yeah, here I was, invited as an honoured guest, though I wasn't sure why. The lobby was a whirl of glittering heels and cocktail dresses. Waiters glided between clusters of guests, trays aloft with champagne flutes. The chandelier above shimmered like a frozen waterfall. I clenched the clutch at my side, pulling a deep breath to steady myself. Then I saw them, Alison and two of our cousins, Marcus and Daniela, leaning against a marble column, murmuring and laughing quietly. "Why's she here?" Daniela hissed when she spotted me. Her voice carried across the marble floor. Marcus's lips curled in a smirk. Alison's gaze darted between me and the entrance as though assessing the risk of exposure. I forced a polite smile and lifted my chin. "Hello, everyone." Their whisper ceased for a moment, and then Daniela raised an eyebrow. "Liz, right, we didn't know you were part of this event." Her tone skated on the edge of amusement and disdain. I took another step, straightening my spine. "Actually, I was invited as a sponsor." Their eyebrows shot up in unison. Alison's mouth fell open. Marcus shook his head, chuckling softly. "A sponsor?" he repeated, as if tasting the word for the first time, before I could elaborate. A deep voice echoed through the lobby. "Welcome, Miss Turner." My breath caught again. I turned to see James Fields, our family's event coordinator, striding toward me in a perfectly tailored suit. His dark eyes held a professional warmth. "We're thrilled to recognize your generous sponsorship of this gala." I blinked. Sponsorship? My voice sounded small beneath the chandelier's glare. "I'm not a sponsor." James gave a courteous nod. "Quite the contrary. You provided the seed donation that allowed us to secure our keynote speaker and the main ballroom decor." I swallowed, confusion swirling in my chest. The gala programs bore my name beneath the heading Event Sponsors, right alongside the Johnson matriarch. A chorus of unfamiliar voices hailed me from across the room. Lights flashed as a photographer captured my entrance. Some guests offered polite applause. My cheeks burned. Alison stepped forward, her voice almost gentle. "Liz, I didn't realize you would be acknowledged like this." I forced a laugh that tasted bitter. "Neither did I." As James guided me toward the registration desk, I felt each whisper, each sidelong glance, every stifled giggle weigh on my shoulders. The lobby seemed to tilt, the polished marble floor sliding beneath my feet. Yet beneath the swirl of embarrassment lay a spark of determination. I straightened further, meeting another guest's curious stare with a steady gaze. Near the registration desk, a hostess took my hand, snapping a ribbon of white satin around my wrist. "Madam Sponsor," she said with a practiced smile, "please enjoy the champagne buffet and welcome remarks." I nodded at her as though I belonged. My heart thundered, but my mind clicked into focus. If I was to be the sponsor, I might as well fulfill the role with grace. I moved into the crowd, navigating past clusters of socialites and philanthropists, absorbing the opulent decor and the buzz of charitable ambition in the air. I found a secluded corner by a tall floral arrangement of orchids and lilac. The scented petals added sweetness to the air. Leaning against the marble pedestal, I allowed my thoughts to gather. Why had James credited me with a sponsor donation? Had my transfer been enough to meet some hidden threshold? Or had someone, perhaps Alison, intended for me to lead this event? My pulse steadied beneath the soft glow of crystal chandeliers. The cool marble under my fingertips grounded me back to reality. I reminded myself that my passion for community and genuine desire to help mattered far more than any social standings or whispered judgments. A waiter passed, offering a flute of sparkling wine. I accepted it gratefully, the bubbles prickling. My reflection shimmered in the polished silver tray. I lifted the glass to my lips, letting the cool liquid fortify my nerves. From the stage, a microphone crackled, and James's voice rang out. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our esteemed sponsor, Miss Elizabeth Turner." A hush fell, and then applause rose again. My spine straightened as I stepped forward. Each footstep echoed through the hall. Head held high, I approached the stage, the satin of my dress whispering with each movement. The orchid bouquet on the lectern seemed a silent benediction. As I reached the microphone, I saw Alison's face in the front row, surprise mingled with something unreadable. Daniela and Marcus remained seated, their expressions blank, unreadable. My heart fluttered, anticipation mingling with anxiety. I took a breath, letting the steady hum of the crowd recede into silence. My mind cleared of doubt, and I spoke. "Good evening. When I made the donation for this gala, I didn't imagine today's honor. I believe in the work this foundation does supporting underserved communities in our city, fostering arts and education. I stand here not for applause, but because I care deeply about creating opportunities for others. Thank you for welcoming me into this role." As my words filled the room, a warm glow spread through me. This was more than a social event. It was a chance to channel my passion into real impact. And despite the unexpected spotlight and my cousin's whispered questions, I knew this night marked the beginning of my own journey toward making a difference. Earlier that week, I had received a phone call from James. I remembered flipping through my planner, thinking I could spare the amount he requested. At the time, my small collection of freelance earnings and savings seemed sufficient. I had rationalized that any contribution would be meaningful, even if compared to the foundation's benefactors. Helping local artists find studio space had always been my dream, and I believe in channeling resources toward real passion projects. On the evening of the call, I had texted Alison, asking if she knew anything about a sponsorship opportunity. She responded with a flurry of emojis and a brief "it's family business, no worries." I sensed dismissal in her tone, but I trusted her more than anyone. Our childhood memories were woven from shared laughter under summer sun and whispered secrets in grandmother's attic. Her reassurance had quelled any unease until tonight. As I stood under the stark chandeliers in the crowd, I overheard two guests whispering about the new sponsor. One woman in a sapphire dress leaned close to her companion and murmured, "She seems too young for such a generous gift." The companion nodded, adjusting her pearl necklace. I could hear the unspoken words, naive, inexperienced, lucky. I imagined my younger self at age 8, standing on a chair in our grandmother's living room, crafting homemade posters for her art show. She had encouraged me then, hers bright with pride. Now I channeled that same energy into supporting creators who struggled to find their place. My voice on stage had carried that legacy forward. The marble floor reflected the crystal lights like stars on a polished pond. I inhaled the mingled scents of orchids, expensive leather handbags, and freshly polished shoes. The distant hum of the city beyond the center's solid walls reminded me of the people I hoped to impact, the mural artists painting alleyway walls, the young musicians composing melodies in cramped apartments, the dancers rehearsing on studio floors lit by dusty afternoon sun. As applause faded beneath the vaulted ceiling, I realized the weight of this moment, not as an admission of wealth or status, but as a declaration of purpose. I was here to build bridges between resources and ambition. I was here to turn dreams into visible realities. Glancing back at the marble doors where I had entered, I saw a new version of myself, unsettled, but resolute, humbled by unexpected recognition and determined to live up to its promise. The night still lay ahead, filled with whispered conversations and sparkling glasses, but I felt anchored by the certainty of my own convictions. For the first time, being called a sponsor felt like more than a title. It felt like an invitation to step into my own story. Just as I stepped down from the stage, someone tapped my shoulder. I turned to see a young artist paint-stained jeans and worn sneakers against gala attire. She seemed nervous and hopeful. She handed me a portfolio. "Miss Turner," she said, "I heard you support creators. Could you review my work?" Her Request captured the true purpose of this evening. I nodded and smiled, ready to begin, truly excited. I guided the young artist to a quiet corner near the orchid arrangement. Her portfolio clutched tightly in both hands, she spread the sketchbook open on the marble pedestal and flipped through pages filled with charcoal studies of cityscapes and emotional portraits. Her eyes darted between each page, and my face as if seeking approval I did not know if I could give. I offered gentle feedback, pointing out the way her shading captured the contrast between light and shadow in an alleyway scene. She nodded, relief softening her expression, and thanked me with a confidence I silently marveled at, remembering my own insecurities. As the gala progressed, I drifted between conversations, offering introductions to gallery owners and arts patrons who asked thoughtful questions about her work. Each time I glanced back at my cousins, I noticed shifting expressions. Daniela's lips pressed together in cautious curiosity, Marcus raising an intrigued brow. Allison caught my eye and offered a small smile. The first genuine warmth I had seen from her that evening. Midway through the evening, I found myself beside the dessert table, sampling a delicate raspberry tart when Allison approached with 2 champagne flutes. She handed me a glass and said, quietly, "I owe you an apology for questioning your presence tonight." I accepted her words with a nod, acknowledging that pride and tradition had clouded her judgment. Her gaze softened and she added, "Your support means more than any of the others here can comprehend." I smiled, feeling a bridge form between us, and replied that I simply wanted to uplift the talents that deserve recognition. Together we toasted, the clinking glass reverberating through the high ceilings, sealing a newfound respect between us, emboldened by that exchange. I returned to the main hall, where the charity auction was about to begin. Rows of illuminated display cases showcased silent auction items ranging from original paintings to weekend retreats at lakeside cabins. A hush fell as the auctioneer stepped onto the raised platform, his gavel polished to a reflective sheen. Bidding began gingerly, voices tentative, until a passionate collector drove the price for a coastal seascape skyward. I observed the competitiveness with fascination, remembering how competition had defined so many family gatherings we endured growing up. My gaze shifted to Allison, who raised her paddle hesitantly, her shoulders squared with determination rather than tradition. A heated back and forth ensued over a bold, abstract piece, paddles flying until the final bid surprised everyone. Whispers spread that the mystery sponsor had claimed that painting, causing Daniela to lean toward me in disbelief. She whispered, "You must have money to burn." But I gained her reluctant respect with a simple shrug. Allison's paddle remained steady until the last item, a collaborative mural project, where she pledged the winning bid for community workshops. I joined her as the applause rose, feeling our shared commitment to art and community bridge old rivalries. Once the gavel fell and the auction concluded, guests began mingling around the hors d'oeuvres trays, laughter echoing beneath crystal chandeliers. I caught sight of a young poet reciting a powerful verse about resilience, her voice trembling with raw emotion. Drawn to her performance, I approached and introduced myself, commending her ability to articulate struggle and hope in equal measure. She hesitated, then handed me a small booklet of her poems and asked if I would consider sponsoring her next reading night. I felt a surge of purpose as I agreed, realizing this role offered tangible ways to empower creative voices. A soft spotlight flickered on the stage where James announced the final presentation. A short film by emerging directors supported by the foundation. Guests settled into seats of plush velvet, the hush amplifying the anticipation of unseen creativity projected onto the grand screen. I leaned forward as the lights dimmed, recalling my own days of filming community events with a borrowed camera. The short film flickered to life. Scenes of urban dancers twirling on rooftop edges, bathed in golden sunset hues. A hush of awe fell over the audience as music swelled, and the narrative unfolded, capturing struggle, connection, and triumph. When the credits rolled, applause erupted, echoing like thunder against the gallery walls. I rose with tears in my eyes and clapped not only for the directors, but for the sense of community that had shaped my own journey. As the lights brightened, James gestured toward me and invited everyone to share final reflections in an impromptu panel discussion. I joined Allison, Marcus, and Daniela on stage, each taking a turn to speak about what this foundation meant to us. My voice trembled slightly, but I shared how witnessing talent firsthand had reaffirmed my commitment to advocate for underrepresented voices. Daniela admitted she had underestimated me, and that my perspective had broadened her understanding of what true sponsorship entails. Marcus nodded in agreement, acknowledging that tradition should never overshadow genuine passion and purpose. Alison spoke last, her voice steady as she thanked me for stepping into a role she realized I was destined for. The audience erupted in applause once more, and I felt the evening settle into a harmonious finale that echoed with promise. Later, as guests began to depart, I overheard snippets of gratitude and plans for future collaborations, each name a story waiting to unfold. Alison linked arms with me, her familiar warmth comforting as we stepped into the night air. The dawnlight filtered through my curtains the morning after the gala, and I lay still for a moment, letting the events of the previous night replay in my mind like a film reel. The echo of applause, the hush of the audience, the quiet wait of my cousin's apology, all of it felt surreal now that the sun crested the horizon. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and pressed my feet into the soft rug, grounding myself in the now. The satin of my dress was gone, replaced by soft pajamas and the promise of a new day. I reached for my phone to find a dozen missed messages, thank you notes from artists, follow-up requests from gallery directors, and a text from Alison, coffee today. My heart fluttered at the thought of seeing her again, knowing that what began as awkwardness between us had shifted into something collaborative. Even SISTEL, by mid-morning, I was seated at a small round table in a local cafe, the scent of roasted beans swirling in the air. Alison slid into the seat across from me, cradling a latte in her hands. She smiled, genuine this time, and offered a croissant from a paper bag. We dove into logistical plans almost immediately, finalizing the $5,000 grant for the emerging mural project, setting dates for community workshops, and outlining promotion strategies. I admired the way her brow furrowed in concentration. It reminded me of late nights studying together in college, as we sketched event timelines on napkins and compared calendars. I felt the old familial bonds strengthen with each shared goal. Something new was taking root between us, built not on gossip and rivalry, but on mutual respect and the shared dream of giving artists a stage. That afternoon, I joined James and the Foundation's program manager in the Johnson Center's sunlit conference room. The oak table gleamed under the skylight as we spread out brochures and budgets. I discovered that the main gallery owners wanted to host a rotating exhibit of the young poets' work I had sponsored, while a local community college offered space for monthly readings. Together, we mapped out a 6-month schedule, assigning responsibilities and drafting outreach emails. I was surprised by the confidence in my suggestions, the deference given to my opinions. Once I would have hesitated to speak up in such a setting, but in that moment, I felt anchored by purpose and buoyed by the knowledge that my voice mattered. Later, I visited the studio of the mural artist whose work had sold at auction. The space was a converted warehouse, walls splashed with vibrant color, paint cans lining the floor all like silent witnesses to creativity. She greeted me with a bright hug, eyes shining with gratitude. We stood before her latest piece, a sweeping depiction of urban life in cobalt and gold. I asked about her vision for the community workshops, and she described wanting to teach teenagers how to transform blank alley walls into public art. I offered to connect her with the neighborhood council for permits and to find volunteers among my college friends studying urban planning. As I left, the midday sun cast long shadows across the concrete floor, and I felt the momentum of collaboration humming in the air. That evening, I attended the first poetry reading my sponsorship had funded. The intimate space was set up in a repurposed bookstore cafe, low lanterns glowing over mismatched chairs. I watched as nervous poets took the stage, their trembling voices gaining strength with each line. The young woman whose booklet I'd accepted at the gala stepped up to the microphone, her cheeks pink with anticipation. When she began, her words painted images of resilience, lines about rain-soaked streets and the stubborn persistence of wildflowers. I felt tears prick the corners of my eyes. After the reading, I introduced her to a local press editor who offered to publish her next chapbook. As we stood talking under warm lamplight, I realized I had become more than a sponsor. I was a champion, connecting talent with opportunity. The following weekend, I hosted an art-am poetry workshop for high school students in a community center. Near my apartment, I arranged folding tables, provided canvases and brushes, and invited both the mural artist and the poet to lead sessions. Watching teenagers dip brushes into paint and scribble verses in notebooks, I felt a swell of pride I hadn't known I could experience. One shy girl presented a small canvas. She'd painted an abstract swirl of magenta and green and thanked me for believing in her. I knelt beside her and told her how brave it was to share her art. She smiled shyly, and I saw in her eyes the same spark I'd had at her age, dreaming of a chance to create. As the workshop wrapped up, parents approached me to express how much the program meant to their kids. My heart felt full in a way I couldn't have imagined before the gala. Sometime that week, I found a quiet moment to reflect on how much had changed in just a few days. I sat on my balcony, the city skyline etched against an evening sky turning lavender, and allowed myself to feel both pride and humility. I thought about how my cousins had questioned my presence, and how quickly that shifted once purpose replaced preconception. My mind drifted to the countless small steps that had led here. The text from James, the hesitant paddle raisers at auction, the young artists who trusted me with their work. I marveled at the power of a single donation to ripple outward, affecting dozens of lives. And I understood that being a sponsor wasn't about wealth or prestige, it was about lending your voice to those whose stories needed to be heard. Of course, obstacles cropped up. A week later, the community center called to say their funding deadline for the mural permits had moved up unexpectedly. I scrambled to rearrange budgets and secure an emergency meeting with the neighborhood council. Meanwhile, a last-minute gallery backer expressed doubts about hosting the poets' collection, fearing it was too niche. I spent a late night drafting persuasive emails, sharing testimonials from local educators, and an Instagram feed full of young poets' reactions. The next morning, I learned that both issues had been resolved. The council granted the permits on short notice, and the gallery backer relented after reading the students' feedback. The relief that washed over me taught me that persistence and heartfelt advocacy could surmount red tape and skepticism. Through it all, my relationship with Alison blossomed. We began meeting each weekend to brainstorm future events, collaborative concerts, open studio nights, and mini grants for filmmakers. Each plan we sketched felt like another thread weaving us closer together. Marcus even approached me to ask if he could help manage social media promotion, admitting he underestimated my abilities. Daniela signed up to volunteer at the next workshop, her earlier disdain replaced by genuine enthusiasm. I realized our family dynamics had shifted from competition to teamwork, and I relished the warmth of belonging without the sting of comparison. Now, as I close this chapter and the final scenes of our summer events approach, I feel both exhausted and exhilarated. I look forward to unveiling the community mural next weekend, a collaboration of teenagers, the mural artist, and local volunteers. The poet will host a reading beneath it once it's complete, tying visual art to verse. Standing there, brush in hand or book in lap, I'll remember how a single, unexpected invitation to be a sponsor transformed not only my cousin's perceptions, but my own life's trajectory. I'll remember the power of believing in art and people, and I'll step forward with the same conviction that carried me onto that stage under crystal chandeliers, ready to champion every story that deserves to be told.